This is breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.
We're in the third decade of a historic drought that has caused conditions that the people who built this system would not have imagined. If you look out the window on this setting, you see the water intakes for Hoover Dam. And clearly they were designed to be able to take in water all the way up to these levels. And you look at the bathtub rings around Lake Mead, and you know what the system was designed for and where it stands today. And then just across the street here is the spillway that hasn't seen a drop of Colorado River water since 1983. And so it is hard to imagine sometimes that, among other things, this system was built for flood control. And yet here we are at the shores of Lake Mead at 25% of its capacity. That said, we're thankful for this winter's snow and rain, thank goodness. But everyone who lives and works in the basin knows that one good year will not save us from more than 2 decades of drought. We've had other good precipitation years during this 23-year drought, and yet the downward trajectory of the system has worsened. We cannot kick the can on finding solutions, and the women and men responsible for managing the system for the benefit of 40 million Americans and countless ecosystems, many of whom are with us today, are completely unified in our commitment to find those solutions. Recognizing the severity of this crisis and the reality that the system is changing in profound ways, the Biden administration has been working to bring every tool, every resource to bear as we seek to both minimize the impacts of the drought and develop long-term plans to facilitate water conservation and economic growth. The Interior Department is helping lead this all-of-government approach to the drought crisis by coordinating with our partners across the West to deploy resources that conserve water and increase the efficiency of water use in the Colorado River Basin. So what is our strategy? Our strategy includes 3 elements. First, President Biden and Congress have made historic investments through the Investing in America agenda, including $15.4 billion to enhance the West's water resilience to drought. Together, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act are the largest investments in climate resilience in our nation's history. This is a true all-of-government mobilization involving not only the Interior Department, but our federal partners at USDA, EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, and others working with states, tribes, local government, and communities throughout the basin. I point you to the comprehensive fact sheet issued by the White House summarizing these investments, but they're summed up in the motto of one team, one fight. For example, last week we made several significant announcements, including over $500 million for infrastructure repairs on water delivery systems. We announced major projects in partnership with the Gila River Indian community for water conservation that alone will add 2 feet of elevation to Lake Mead. This is an example of Indian country leading the way for all Americans in the basin. We also announced $20 million for 4 surface water storage and groundwater storage projects in California and Utah. Every bit helps. These are examples of the investments that are vital to conserving water and making communities more resilient. The second element of our strategy is that we need new tools to protect elevations in these reservoirs and to keep the system operating at this time of unprecedented strain. Accordingly, last fall, the Interior Department and Bureau of Reclamation initiated an expedited process to revise the current interim operating guidelines for Glen Canyon and Hoover Dams, which the modeling shows may, in the near future, the existing guidelines may in the near future prove inadequate to protect the system and ensure power generation and water deliveries. We undertook this process to equip Reclamation with the alternatives and tools needed to address the likelihood of continued low runoff conditions and reduced water availability throughout the basin. And today, following months of intensive discussion and collaborative work with our basin state partners and water commissioners, 30 basin tribes, water managers, farmers and irrigators, municipalities, and other stakeholders, we are releasing a draft supplemental environmental impact statement for public comment. This draft SEIS reflects intensive coordination and collaboration between all 7 basin states and the federal government. From the beginning, we committed to pursuing a collaborative, consensus-based approach to ensure that any action from the department is done with as much engagement and consensus as possible. The draft alternatives in the supplemental EIS build on models and ideas we received from all 7 basin states. They also are intended to drive further collaboration and work among all parties towards the development of additional consensus-based solutions and agreements to achieve these goals. We are deliberately undertaking a public process that is transparent and inclusive, as is necessary and appropriate for a system supporting the entire American Southwest. As Commissioner Tootin will describe, the alternatives include actions based on the Secretary's authority to operate the system, to provide for human health and safety, address emergency conditions, and beneficial use. The alternatives also provide room for additional work and solutions, which leads to the third element of our strategy. We and all of the partners before you today and throughout the basin are committed to finding solutions and reaching agreements to conserve water and protect the system and communities. In addition to equipping Reclamation with the tools it needs, this SEIS is intended to drive those conversations and negotiations forward. Some of the commentary has depicted an us versus them dynamic in the basin. I don't see that at all. I see commitment, collaboration, and problem solving. These are difficult issues, decades in the making. And so, yes, some of the conversations can be difficult as well. The reason I'm hopeful that new agreements and solutions will continue to emerge, though, is that the spirit in the basin is one of community and collaboration. All 7 basin states and the communities they represent are unified in finding common solutions in the best interests of the 40 million people who depend on this precious resource, the Colorado River. Finally, I want to thank the scores of people at the Bureau of Reclamation and our cooperating agencies and partners who have dedicated countless hours to produce the draft that we're releasing today. Thank you. This work on a very aggressive timeline could not have been possible without these dedicated public servants. And leading this great team is someone who needs no introduction in the Colorado River Basin, which she has called home since she was a little girl. I am grateful to work alongside her, and now I turn over the microphone to our Commissioner, Camille Tootin.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary, and hello everyone for joining us today. It's a beautiful day in Nevada. It's good to be home. Last June, I briefed Congress on the science of the Colorado River Basin, the risks we saw to the system, and the action we needed to stabilize the system. Every day since, the team at the Bureau of Reclamation and I have worked tirelessly with our partners to develop the tools and strategies needed to improve and protect the stability and the sustainability of the Colorado River system now and into the future. As the Deputy Secretary mentioned, this work has been complemented by historic investments from President Biden's Investing in America agenda. The bipartisan infrastructure law includes $8.3 billion for the Bureau of Reclamation for infrastructure to advance drought resilience and expand access to clean water for families, farmers, and wildlife. The Inflation Reduction Act is investing another $4.6 billion to address Western drought. These investments have been historic, but their lasting success relies on all of us coming together to chart a path for the future. The release of this draft SEIS provides the opportunity to implement fundamental changes for the future sustainability of this vital water resource. Since the draft supplemental process was initiated in October, we have met regularly with our Basin States partners, the 30 Basin tribes, water managers, farmers and irrigators, municipalities, and other stakeholders. We have pored over hydrologic assessments and data reports to ensure our actions are guided by the best and latest science. We've toured water infrastructure projects along the Colorado River and across the Basin States to see firsthand the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead of us. All of this work has been done to ensure that the draft supplemental impact statement that we are releasing charts the strongest possible path forward to protect the Colorado River system. The draft SEIS analyzes alternatives and measures to address potential shortages and to protect Glen Canyon and Hoover Dam operations system integrity and public health and safety in the event that such measures are required in 24 and continuing through 26 when the current operating guidelines expire. The alternatives presented in the draft SEIS, which I'll walk through momentarily, analyze measures that may be taken under the leadership of Secretary Deb Haaland's authorities to protect system operations in the face of unprecedented hydrologic conditions while providing allocations of water to communities in the lower basin that rely on the Colorado River system. The draft SEIS analyzes 3 alternatives, which reflect input from Basin states, cooperating agencies, tribes, and other interested parties, included comments submitting to our public scoping period. The first is the no action alternative. This alternative describes the consequences of continued implementation using only existing agreements that control operations of Glen Canyon and Hoover Dams, including further deteriorating hydrologic conditions and reservoir operations. The no action alternative, under this no action alternative, we will see the most impacts to the system. We can expect water levels to continue to decline, threatening the operations of the system and the water supply of 40 million people. There are 2 action alternatives. Both analyze reducing releases from Glen Canyon Dam. The total lower basin shortages for each alternative are the same at 2.083 million acre-feet domestically, which includes shortages under existing agreements. This is because the 2 million acre-feet is the maximum volume analyzed in the 2007 interim guidelines, final environmental impact statement. Action Alternative 1 looks at the additional lower Colorado River Basin shortages based on the concept of priority. Action Alternative 2 analyzes the additional reductions that are distributed in the same percentage across the lower basin water users in shortage condition. This alternative models a pro rata way to spread water shortages to maintain critical elevations in the 2 reservoirs. As the Deputy Secretary mentioned, not only do the draft alternatives incorporate models and concepts received from all of the basin states, but they are also intended to drive further collaboration work among all parties toward the development of an additional consensus-based solution to protect the system. This draft will provide us all with a sustainable path forward that builds on the commitment and unity of the basin states and tribes to support all of the communities that rely on this critical system. The draft supplemental environmental impact statement will be available for public comment for 45 days, and the final SEIS is anticipated to be available with a record of, decision in summer 2023. This will inform the August 2023 decisions that will affect future operations in 2024. The work is hard, but it is part of our commitment to do everything we can as part of the Biden-Harris administration's all-of-government approach to invest in all of our communities. The Colorado River Basin includes a myriad of states, tribes, cities, towns, farms, and ecosystems. But fundamentally, it is one community comprised of 40 million people in landscapes that need us to get this right. To meet this moment, we must work together through our shared values and a commitment to protecting the river, leading with science and with creativity, and a shared understanding that unprecedented conditions require new solutions. I am grateful to be surrounded by so many professionals who care deeply and personally about making our communities more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And I want to thank my team at the Bureau of Reclamation for the outstanding work in producing this document in record time. I also want to acknowledge the representatives from the lower and upper basin states, as well as tribal leaders who are working tirelessly to find solutions. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tom Bushatsky, the Director of Arizona's Department of Water Resources and the Governor's representative for the Colorado River. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tootin. So I want to start by recognizing Deputy Secretary Boudreau and Reclamation Commissioner Tootin, and to thank the federal team for all the work they have done to protect the Colorado River system to date, and for completing this draft EIS so we can move forward with the additional actions we need to take to protect the river. I also want to recognize Esteban Lopez and Becky Mitchell, my colleagues from the Upper Basin, and Vice Chairman Long from the Cocopah tribe, also representing the 10 Tribes Partnership. And last but certainly not least, my Lower Basin colleagues, J.B. Hamby and John Ensminger. Over the last 2 decades, many steps have been taken, including very difficult ones, and they have helped to stave off draconian outcomes for the river and the reservoirs we depend on. But looking out at Lake Mead behind me, it's a stark visual reminder of why we are here today. Some may believe that this winter's snow and rain has saved the river, but that is not the case. We have a lot of hard work and difficult decisions ahead of us in this basin to achieve our goal, a resilient Colorado River system. The draft SEIS that's been discussed here today presents multiple paths forward, but those paths have dire consequences in some cases and may spur opposition or even litigation, unacceptable outcomes. Instead, let us accelerate our discussions in the basin for a collaborative, consensus-based outcome. We have tools, we've heard of many of them already, at our disposal, developed over the last decade and a half or so, and we now have additional resources from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act to enhance the effectiveness of those tools. We need to use every tool we have in the toolbox. But let's not forget the most powerful tool in the toolbox, and that is the commitment of me and my colleagues, our tribal partners, and others in the basin to create a resilient Colorado River system for all of our constituents, our economies, our quality of life, and for the environment. In the coming days, we will work tirelessly to achieve that outcome. That concludes my remarks, and then I have the pleasure of introducing the next speaker, Esteban Lopez. Esteban is New Mexico's governor's representative on Colorado River matters in general, and New Mexico's commissioner for the Upper Colorado River Commission.
Thank you, Tom. And I also want to begin first by acknowledging Deputy Secretary Boudreau and Commissioner Tootin and all of the federal team that has done just an amazing job of pushing forward this draft SEIS in a record time. It's not only them, but it's all of our state colleagues, many of them represented here today. I want to acknowledge our Lower Basin colleagues, Director Bushatsky, Mr. Hamby, Mr. Ensminger, and then I'm joined by an Upper Basin colleague, Rebecca Mitchell from Colorado, but we're not joined by Gene Shawcroft from Utah or Brandon Gephardt from Wyoming. That should not be taken as a disinterest on their part. There's just an awful lot going on. I know at least one of them had another separate compact meeting to attend to today. So what I'd like to mention is that the release of this draft SEIS is an incredibly important step provided by Reclamation for further discussion amongst the states and Reclamation and the tribes to really try and build a robust consensus. Again, I think Reclamation is to be commended for the work that they've done so far, but there's an awful lot to get done to get to the end point that we need to be at. As you all know, a few months ago, the 6 states submitted a consensus, a 6-state consensus alternative for review. Unfortunately, we were given the tight time frame. We were unable to reach a 7-state consensus, but California similarly submitted their own alternative. What I was heartened by then was the fact that both recommendations really acknowledged kind of the extent of the shortages that we will have to face. And it also acknowledged, both alternatives acknowledged that whether we like it or not, the heavy lifting has to happen within the Lower Basin. The Upper Basin is already taken and continues to take significant hydrologic shortages. I'm heartened, having heard only a very, very brief description of the draft SEIS yesterday, that draft SEIS also recognizes those key points, the necessity of hard actions, and that we all have to work together on it. Obviously, we haven't seen the details, but I think it gives us a lot to work with, such that we can, I believe, build towards a full 7 states consensus. I also want to recognize, as others have, that this year we've been given a rare gift. The hydrology this year has been nothing short of amazing. And I think it's now up to us to assure that we don't squander it. We have an opportunity here to rebuild supplies that were kind of loaned to the system, if you will, under the emergency drought actions that were taken over the course of the last year. We have an opportunity to begin to recover in a small way, but significant water levels in both Lakes Powell and Meade. I urge us not to squander this opportunity. Over the course of the last 5 years, and you can certainly go back further if you'd like, the Colorado River Basin has been almost in a constant state of emergency, requiring a whole series of almost emergency actions to keep from getting to a really bad place. I think that highlights the reality that we're facing, the new reality that we're facing, that we have to do something different. And Reclamation's issuance of this SEIS I think is a similar recognition of that. And we are committed, Commissioner, myself and our Basin States colleagues are committed to getting this right. We absolutely have to get this right. There's 40 million people that are relying on us. We also need to move beyond just the continual emergency actions and get into a mode where we are doing some real planning for the long term. I think this SEIS sets the stage for that. And we are working hard throughout the entire basin. In the upper basin, we are taking, as everyone is, we are working closely with all of the Colorado River stakeholders. Most notably, we are meeting weekly with the upper basin tribes and keeping them apprised of the management matters. They are committed as well to helping us get this right. And with that, I want to move to introduce Chairwoman Long. She's the chair of the 10 Tribes Partnership, Colorado River 10 Tribes Partnership, and the vice chair of the Cocopah Tribe. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Rosa Long. I am the vice chair of the Cocopah Indian Tribe, as you heard, and I'm also the chair of the 10 Tribes Partnership, which I obtained that leadership role in December at CRUA in Las Vegas. So I'm back. And first of all, before I start, when I wanted to acknowledge the ancestral lands of the Fort Mojave Indian Tribe, of which we are on. Chairman Timothy Williams and his Vice Chairman Shan Lewis and his entire council have been extremely involved in water and always looking out for resources and opportunities to utilize their water efficiently and very, how can I say, they just want to take care of the river. So they're very much in this with us together, but I do want to start off by acknowledging them. The Colorado River is a vital source of water for millions of people in both the upper and lower basins, and its preservation is crucial to the survival of both the human and natural communities that depend on it. The collaboration between tribal and federal governments is essential in ensuring the long-term health and its sustainability, an invaluable resource, and its success. We have heard from experts in a wide range of fields about the challenges facing the Colorado River and the innovative solutions that are being developed to address them. But we also recognize that this work is far from over. As you already heard, it is very difficult for the commissioner to come up here and to brief you on such an important document that is going to affect everyone. And so, I stand here to support her on that. That was just released. And so we have to be supportive and we all have to work together on this. So as I said, we've heard from all the experts and all the challenges that we face. You can see it as they've mentioned with the rings behind us, that you can visibly see the lower levels of the Colorado River. And it's a very scary situation when it is feeding 40 million people. And so in saying that, we want to recognize the hard work of everyone involved, those tribal leaders that came before me, that began this partnership, all those other ad hoc and committees that came before us, our elders that from each of the tribes that take care of their river. This is where we, our creation story came from. If you want to know how important this river is to us. So we want to take care of it. We want to work with the government and build that partnership together. And so we must remember that this continued support for each other is necessary for future generations. We must remember that our actions today will have a profound impact on the world our children and grandchildren will inherit. We owe it to them to work together to find solutions that balance the needs of the people and the environment. I want to express my deepest gratitude to all the leaders from all the tribes and federal agencies and the non-governmental organizations, our partners in Mexico, agricultural producers who have contributed to the efforts of preservation of the river, and the migrant workers who care for the crops that feed our families. Your dedication and your hard job are an inspiration to us all. I too was a field worker at one time, so I know that they're all going to be impacted if we don't work together. In closing, let us commit to continuing our collaboration and to work together in the spirit of mutual respect and understanding. By doing so, we can ensure that the Colorado River remains a vital and thriving resource for generations to come. Committing to a dialogue in which we are all a part of is an important first step, and we look forward to working with Reclamation and Interior and all the stakeholders in the basin. Thank you all for your participation and contributions to this very important conversation, and it will continue. Tomorrow we have a meeting, 10 Tribes Partnership in Phoenix, that we will be traveling to, and to speak to all those tribes that are going to work together collectively and find solutions, as I just mentioned. This was a very short turnaround. That's why I'm the only one that's here. For me, I like to work together in groups, and I wish all my tribes were here next to me, but they are here in spirit. They're on the phone. I know that they're there and they're supporting this effort, and I will see them soon. I will see them tomorrow. I am very much I like to work in a group, and it's going to take all of us, and it is a very scary situation. And I call on the state of Arizona and all those states that are affected with the Colorado River and its drought, that they think about the conservation of water and what they can do in their households to ensure that we save every drop, because without the river, we won't be able to be here. So I would thank you all for your kind attention, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you. This is my first time actually coming out to the Hoover Dam. I've never made it, always at the CRUA, but thank you so much for your invite, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
We have said, so please bear with us. Before we go to our in-person reporters, if there are folks who are on this chat, or you want to ask a question, and our eventual members of the media, feel free to raise your hand now. We will take in-person questions first, and then and with that, we'll start with Kendra. Thank you. I'm giving one shot, but I'm going to try to achieve it. How do you define health and human safety? How is that defined by population centers and drinking water, or is it agriculture, or hydropower? Seems the goal is health and human safety, correct?
Yeah, so under the Secretary's authority, but also her responsibility, is to ensure that the Colorado River system provides the multitude of services that add up to human health and safety. And so that includes fundamental services such as the delivery of drinking water. It includes services such as the delivery of water for agriculture. It includes maintaining the ability of these dams to generate electricity. And so her responsibility and her authority are broad to operate these dams in the interests of the public, human health and safety in all of those dimensions.
Did we take into account this year's hydrology? So what we looked at for this SEIS is the last 30 years of hydrology, including the last 23 driest years on record. What we're doing as far as hydrology that we see this year, snowpack is at 157% of average, is how we operate the system in water year 2023. Certainly, we want to take advantage of this good resource this year. It hasn't melted yet, so let's not count it until it ends in the reservoirs. But to be able to build in 23, which will help inform water year 2024. Action alternative 2, which is there's 3, the no action alternative, and then 2 action alternatives. Action alternative 1 and 2 look at lower basin shortages at roughly 2 million acre feet. That builds upon existing shortage agreements that we have in place. And the difference with action alternative 2 is that delta that we need, depending on the reservoir levels, is spread across the basin on a pro rata basis based on their consumptive use in water year 2021. No, it's split amongst all water users in the lower basin. So we're making the SEIS document public today. Those numbers are in there, and we're happy to follow up with specifics for each state. Sure. What we're looking at in all of these alternatives is what the system is. The alternative 1 looks at priority. And as we look at no action, which is the worst alternative as far as impacts to cities and communities, we're looking at feedback from option 1, alternative 1, as well as alternative 2. Action alternative 2 looks at a pro rata reduction for all water users in the basin.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the SEIS serves at least 2 purposes. One is to provide alternatives for the Bureau of Reclamation in the event that hydrologic conditions require shortages above and beyond what's provided in the current guidelines as supplemented by the DCP. And that is important to have into place. And so we look forward, as the commissioner said, to everyone's input on those bookends of the options, strict priority and a pro rata share based on consumptive use. There's going to be lots of ideas and comments, and we already know what some of them are on how to refine those alternatives. But at the end of the day, we need to have those tools in place so that reclamation can use them if necessary. What the SEIS also does, though, is, and a number of the commissioners mentioned this, it helps lay out a framework, give something on paper for the ongoing negotiations and conversations among the basin states to chart out agreements, voluntary measures, so that we close the gap on the potential for those shortages. It is our hope and our fervent desire that the tools laid out in the supplemental EIS never have to be used. And the way to get there is through ongoing work with collaborative processes to reach agreements that reflect everyone's best interest. At the end of the day, though, it's the Secretary's responsibility to keep this system operating and continue providing services. And we're going to protect those minimum critical levels at both PAL and MEAD in order to accomplish that.
The question was on public comment, who weighs in? So let me start with timeline. We start a public comment period when it's published in the Federal Register, which is on Friday. It will be a 45-day public comment period open to everyone. What we're looking for is ideas, guidance on how to refine these alternatives. And 45 days will be May 30th. Our goal is to be able to have a record of decision in place so that it can inform our operations in 2024 by this summer.
Virtual hands online. For those who have raised their hand, I'm going to announce their name, and we on the back end will unmute you. And you can ask your question. Luke Runyon, we'll start with you.
Hi, thank you for.
You have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for having this press availability. I think I'd like to hear from leaders from Arizona and California and get their reaction to the different alternatives and whether or not, if depending on which alternative is chosen, if there would be litigation potential from those states.
So Luke, this is Director Bishotsky from Arizona. So as I said in my remarks, our task is to avoid that litigation outcome. So I think we have the opportunity to do so. I think in either alternative in Arizona, there can be some very hard outcomes for our water users, depending on who that is and our economies. I will say this, that while, as Esteban Lopez referred to, while we couldn't come to an agreement among 7 states in January, before that meeting in January, where we both created the consensus alternative, I think California largely formulated the finality of their alternative. JB Hamby and I talked before the meeting was even over about getting together, and I think it was maybe a week or 2 after that that we met to start those discussions, and there have been a bunch of meetings since that also have included Nevada, John representing Nevada. So we do see that litigation could be possible. The Colorado Indian tribes in my state and the Yuma area agriculture interests in my state have already gone on record sending letters to the federal government, raising concerns about cutting in out of the priority system. So we have to avoid that outcome. Once litigation occurs, if it does, it's going to be very difficult to negotiate something moving forward. And many of the issues that we've been able to hold in abeyance through the various agreements over the last 20 years might come to the fore, and it's difficult to see where this is going to end. And in the meantime, litigation that might take 10 or 15 or 20 years is going to be occurring while the system and the lake behind us is going to crash, and some action is going to have to be taken otherwise. So we are committed to avoiding that litigation outcome as best we can by coming up with a collaborative solution. And I'll let JB weigh in.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. In full agreement, I think where we're at in the lower basin in particular between Arizona and California is we're looking to develop a true 7-state consensus in the coming months, ideally in this next 45-day period, if at all possible. We've received a lot of really good beneficial changes since January. The Inflation Reduction Act funding made available by the Congress last summer has made a huge amount of difference in California. California's users have stepped up and offered up to 400,000 acre feet per year over the next few years until the expiration of the current guidelines in 2026. We're having very good conversations between California's various agencies to be able to make quick efforts to generate significant volumes of water in a very short period of time. In addition, we have the benefit of recently improved hydrology that's going to make the worst case outcomes less likely in the next few years. So the combination of those two things, in addition to the very productive dialogue and cooperation and partnership between Arizona and California, sets the stage for a very promising coming weeks and months. And the ideal is to start to move forward as quickly as possible to discussing post-2026 guidelines that'll ideally develop a long-term sustainable path for the Colorado River.
Thank you. We will come back. Let's go to Daniel Rothberg. We will give you the opportunity to unmute yourself.
Hi. I had two quick questions. One, I was wondering if the draft EIS includes a register or explanation of priority in the lower basin, where people fall in terms of seniority. And the second question I had is where negotiations are and discussions are with Mexico.
So yes, to your first question, there is a description of that within the SEIS which we're posting to our website today. Regarding Mexico, we have been in constant communication with our colleagues and partners in Mexico, including a scheduled meeting this week. So as we share the information, as we see the hydrology, we're also having those conversations with Mexico as part of this.
Michael Olasakis, we'll try again. You will have to unmute yourself.
Hello there. I apologize. I did not hear my name get announced, so I appreciate you following back. And thank you so much for this opportunity. We really appreciate you talking this through with us. I'm wondering, I'm trying to quickly scan this large document that just came out, but I'm kind of wondering, when you say what is necessary, is there a level at Lake Mead that would trigger the possibility of this 2 million acre feet cut? I'm just kind of trying to get a better sense of what the numbers that we're looking at again here to kind of get a sense of what might usher in these cuts if they come to be.
Yeah, great question. The fundamental elevations that we are protecting against through these action alternatives are 3,500 feet at Lake Powell and 950 feet at Lake Mead. The reason we have those elevations is those are the minimum responsible elevations to maintain power generation and water delivery services from this infrastructure.
We will try again. Coming to you next, Tony Davis. Ronnie, go ahead and unmute.
I'm with the Arizona Daily Star in Tucson. To Mr. Boudreau or Boudreau, whatever, your comments about, there've been a lot of comments about the good hydrology. If this hydrology turns out as good as they say, does that mean a lot of these reductions that you're talking about in the SES are not going to happen next year? Will that delay them? There's been a lot of back and forth debate on this already. I'd be curious to know what Interior thinks about this, because all I hear is rumors.
So what the modeling shows and what our assessments show is, again, thank goodness for the precipitation. As the commissioner said, we're still looking forward to seeing how much of that precipitation runs off and enters the reservoirs, but it's encouraging. But as you've heard from everyone speaking today, it does not get us off the hook. These deficits that you can, if you're in the room here, look out the window and see, took decades to cause. And one encouraging year of precipitation does not get us out of that hole. So it may create some space within the curves. But again, the hydrologic trend is dire and does require ongoing work throughout the basin to reach agreements to protect the system against those hydrological projections and to equip the Bureau of Reclamation with the tools it needs to continue to operate the system responsibly.
Thank you. Chance, 2 more questions. Jennifer, coming back to you. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks so much for having the press conference. I wanted to ask Secretary Boudreau, as well as all of the state representatives today, is alternative to the pro rata option really viable, or is it really more of a carrot and stick approach to keep the states going? And I'd love just to get the state representatives' opinion on alternative 2. Thanks so much.
Thanks. So I think one way to think about the supplemental EIS and the 3 alternatives presented are modeling and alternatives that set possible futures. So you have the no action alternative, what that would mean to see the system continue to deteriorate and the impacts of that. But between the 2 action alternatives, I think you have a spectrum. You have shortages under both alternatives, and you have application of the priority system. I'll just say, I've never heard anyone advocate, specifically, straight unmitigated priority. That said, it's important for everyone to see what that would look like. At the other end of the spectrum, you have pro rata shares, just taking a look based on consumptive use, a mathematical formula to divide how much water you need to save in the system on a straight line basis across water users. That is also a very rough way to manage those shortages. We've already started having thoughts, and again, we know what many of those thoughts would be about how to refine either of these alternatives. But that is the process we wanted to set in motion, and we're very much looking forward to that dialogue. And so I would not think about either of these 3 alternatives as something we're asking people to choose, but rather they're models and alternatives and ways of defining the problem that we think is constructive to advancing the conversation, not only on the regulatory operational side, but in the ongoing negotiations amongst the basin states on agreements.
So the short answer to your question about viability is the answer is yes. I think from my perspective in Arizona, shortly after Commissioner Tooten's testimony on June 14th of 2022, in discussions within my state and with me in the media, I made it clear that Arizona was seeking an equitable outcome in which the beneficiaries of the value of the system, the economies, the water for people, et cetera, those beneficiaries are all going to share in some way, shape, or form the need to reduce the uses to protect the system. So I think what I see in the SEIS, and I haven't had any opportunity to dive into it, it accomplished the goal from my standpoint that I wanted to see accomplished under certainly the 6-state alternative, the consensus alternative of putting bookends out there with different mechanisms to achieve those bookends, to make sure that the cuts were big enough to really sustain the system. I think for me, starting about this time in 2021, when we got information from the April 24-month study, kind of previewing where we'd be in August of 2021, and seeing the bad trend that was occurring in August of 2021, then we had to do the 500+ plan to try to bolster Lake Mead. Then in the spring last year, we had to take the actions that Interior took for Lake Powell. And so we're on a bit of a merry-go-round. We got to get off the merry-go-round. We need to have an outcome in which the cuts are big enough that we don't have to do these emergency operations every few months, because it's an impossibility to keep that up from a staffing perspective. And I think we lose confidence of the public if they don't see us taking major steps, creating an outcome in which we are stabilizing the system for a long time out into the future.
Giving my Upper Basin perspective, I agree, first of all, with Director Bushatsky. I think that it is a viable outcome, but I don't believe that that is perhaps the most desirable outcome. And I do think the importance of this draft SEIS is that it gives us the framework. It gives us, the states and others, to the framework on which we can build and perhaps find something that is part way between those two bookends. And I think that's our challenge right now. And I, as I've said earlier, I think we are all committed towards meeting that challenge.
You gotta unmute yourself for our last question. All right. All right, we'll wrap it up with one last from Ken.
Mr. Deputy Secretary Bureau, while we've been here today, got a little bit of a development. New York Times is reporting that you're going to advocate for an option that tosses aside priority, so to speak, and makes even cuts regardless of priority. I want to make sure that we understand what your position is. Is that right?
So we've published, as we've talked about for the last hour, we have published a draft supplemental EIS that provides 3 alternatives: no action, what happens if we do nothing, which is a very climate change concept, right? It's like we need action to mitigate consequences. And then the bookends, as we've talked about and our commissioners have talked about, between strict priority system and application of pro rata share. And so we have not expressed a preferred alternative among any of those. We are truly trying to advance the conversation and establish the framework in a way that allows for the conversation of both operations and reclamation's responsibility and the ongoing negotiations among the basin states to find agreements. So I wish there were a widget or a magic bullet or, a wand that we had to produce, an outcome. If that were possible, it would have happened already. There is no substitute for the ongoing work throughout the basin and people of good faith coming together in the common interest. And I do think we have that. What was the last part? Yeah, so that is part of the conversation is, again, we've defined a spectrum. I suspect we're going to get a lot of really good ideas on how to refine or modify or further develop, again, these bookends that we put on the table. So thank you.
You've been watching breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.